It doesn't get much more legendary than Donkey Kong. Argued by many to be the first ever true platformer by today's standards, and not only was it one of the earliest and most important arcade games ever released, it helped in laying down the foundation to this company. And I suppose if we are talking about spin-offs, well, it doesn't get much better than this, does it? Yeah, apparently he's a big deal. I don't know. Yes, Nintendo and the whole of gaming, no matter what you're into, owe a hell of a lot to this confusingly named ape. And although plenty of you folks here watching, especially the UK chaps, will be fully aware of the sheer crazy amount of knockoff Donkey Kong games out there, and I'm not talking about my beloved Sega Congo Bongo, I already did that video, I'm talking about the Gunflight Monkey business on the Atari ST, Crazy Kong for the ZX Spectrum, Killer Kong also for the ZX Spectrum with its bloody awesome front cover. Mario's Brewery for the Commodore 64 is another favourite that replaces Donkey Kong with an angry beer machine, but the absolute best has got to be Honey Kong for the Oric 1, simply because they made Kong himself look even more lifelike than Nintendo ever did by giving him a tail. Yes, people today cry about how Battle Royale modes get shoehorned into every possible game ever released, but at least you peeps didn't need to play Congo Kong, did you? No. Back then, if a game was popular, especially in the arcades, then there was no way of stopping the copycats from flooding in, and although 99% of them are, as expected, complete garbage, sometimes fantastic new ideas do rise from the grave. And today I want to talk about yet another inspired Donkey Kong spin-off that actually did bloody well, whether Nintendo like it or not. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. Sometimes game developers don't make a hell of a lot of games. Sometimes game developers make just a few games. In fact, this is quite common, and is most definitely the case nowadays with the sheer amount of gumph on the Steam store. Well, back in the early 80s, 1983 to be exact, this guy, one Randy Glover, did just that. At the time, Randy was around about 28 years old when he released what is considered one of the very best Atari home computer games ever made. As a youngster, he was into his games, obviously, but after tinkering around with electronics, working out how things worked, he eventually got to a stage that most of the games that he and his friends had played, he would find a way of modding them, essentially teaching himself how to basically code from such a young age. This led to the purchase of his first ever system, the VIC-20. However, games by this point didn't really grab his attention too much. Instead, his desire to continue learning the ins and outs on how a machine like this works became the game that he would constantly try to complete. This led to his second machine, the TRS-80, which, although was definitely not a gaming machine, was in fact where he started to lay down all of his built-up coding knowledge into his very first sort of game. Written in BASIC that apparently involved you playing as a dot, dodging or trying to collide with other dots. It wasn't released, obviously, it was just an experiment that led him down the path of wanting to do more. Anyway, whilst at work, across the street was a Pizza Hut, and inside this Pizza Hut was yet another game that got ripped off even more than Donkey Kong, and that was, of course, Pac-Man. Randy, just like all Americans in the early 80s, got hit by the Pac-Man craze, and instead of going to Pizza Hut to eat pizza, he went there every lunchtime to play Pac-Man. Being that this was a restaurant first and, well, not an arcade, eventually that one Pac-Man machine got changed into a Donkey Kong arcade machine. And with that, Randy got pretty into this game too. Yet, whilst the pizza lovers continued to eat their hot sauce covered pizza in the restaurant, our now 25 to 26-year-old Randy was helping Jumpman save Pauline from Donkey Kong running across scaffolding, jumping barrels and dodging flames. But on top of this, he was was trying to work out how he could make his very own version of the game at home and brought an Atari 400 to help him do just that. And Jumpman was born. Yes, this is Jumpman. Look familiar? Well, yeah, it should. Sure, plenty of games take inspiration from other games. In fact, practically every game ever made would have done so to a degree. But this, well, it feels a tad closer to home than what you may expect. And for those crying that this isn't an unofficial spin-off, take a gander at this interview with Randy Glover himself from episode 171 of the Atari 8-Bit podcast. As usual, there'll be a link in the description.
I modeled my game after Donkey Kong, of course. I used the name, called it Jumpman. I'm told that the word Jumpman was on the Donkey Kong console, or he was called the Jumpman at one point in time. And I don't ever recall lifting that name from there, but it's very possible I did or subconsciously pulled the name Jumpman from it.
So there you go. He said it, and it's what I'm going with. The hardest thing for me to get my head around is that no matter how many articles I read during the game's release, and reviews, and of course fan sites too, nobody seems to talk too much about the Donkey Kong influence found within. Even though, for me, Jumpman is far more than inspiration. Heck, the game started off as an attempt to actually recreate the game. But hey, as controversial as my opinion may be, I'm sticking with it, guys. So Jumpman, in case you didn't already know, was actually a very popular game back in the day. Look up any kind of review from when the game was released and people tend to praise it to the highest levels, claiming that Jumpman will become an arcade classic eventually. I've read reports of it being some people's all-time favourite game, or even in their top 5 games of all time. When you play it, you will start to understand why that is. Sure, there is nostalgia injected into those statements, but the core game, well, it is there, and it feels great, once you get used to it, that is. Everything from the brilliantly cheesy box art and equally cheesy storyline makes for a perfectly awesome package. Jumping around each of the game's 30 stages, collecting all of the bombs and dodging the bad guys is really great, and it holds up incredibly well to this day. It got ported to several other systems, it did well on those too, and although I'm guessing that the vast majority of my console-loving watchers may have never heard of this, those of you that have, go ahead and write down in the comments that you knew about this one, but also try and explain to the other commenters just how important this game was. From my experience, those that have played it tend to love it. A sort of port to the game called Jumpman Junior was created on cartridge next, and although it is often looked at as a sequel, in Randy's own words, it's actually more like a light version of the original game, consisting of 12 levels rather than 30. So before carrying on, I know what you guys are thinking. What did the mighty, somewhat trigger-happy juggernaut Nintendo have to say about all this? Well, surprisingly, nothing. Jumpman, as in Donkey Kong's Jumpman, was very much Mario by this point, and whether or not they didn't see the similarities or, simply didn't care, is unknown, because although Randy stayed at Epix, the publisher who put out these games, he didn't work on another Jumpman game for quite some time. Jumpman Junior was re-released on the Commodore 64 direct-to-TV joystick thing, and the original game itself was even released on a Nintendo system that was the Wii Virtual Console towards the end of the noughties. Still getting great reviews for what it was from such sites as Nintendo Life. But the real interesting part about all of this was that Randy, who had already left Epix a few years later and stopped creating games, realised in the late part of the 1990s that a rather decent sized following could be found online, and he decided to work on Jumpman 2 and document the whole thing over at Jumpman2.com. Sadly, however, there really is next to nothing left on this site nowadays, even if you do go searching back via the Wayback Machine. But still, at one point, Jumpman 2 was in development, but progress did stop, like I said, around about 2001. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the last time Randy ever worked on a Jumpman game. But it wasn't the last we heard of Jumpman. There was crazy amounts of fan-made games, and in 1991, Jumpman Lives, a complete remake of the original game, was released, but due to not owning the license, it got pulled pretty quickly after a cease and desist came in, leaving one final official game.
I wanna take you for a ride.
Oh yes! This isn't just a complete history of sorts to Jumpman, it's also a little bit of a kick scammer too, guys, because in 2014, another official sequel called Jumpman Forever was made, and technically, I mean, it wasn't a scam per se. However, the full release that was supposed to come out on the Ouya, PC, Mac, iOS and Android did get released, although not in the best state ever, and it only got released on the Ouya, making this game the final game in a rather impressively long list of games with thousands of adoring fans, completely exclusive to this system. I'm probably never going to say that ever again. So yeah, that's the meat of it all, guys. Just like the advertising said, if you liked Donkey Kong, you'll love Jumpman. And for those wondering, why have I decided to do this video? Well, that's because I do have one other Epix franchise that I want to cover. See you at the weekend. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the video. I want to give a big special shout out to all of my Patreons, but first I want to give an extra big shout out to Player One Clothing, who are my new official sponsor for Slope's Game Room. Go and check out the website, and like I said, don't forget to use the limited code SGR20 when you're at the checkout. And if you want to check out the game playing on the screen, then also do check the affiliate links below. But anyway, back to those Patrons, with an extra big shout out going to That Retro Video Gamer, Gary Pinkett, Mantis, Ryan Burford, Andrew Dalton, Jonathan Hayward, Tomek Grabowski, Christopher Turnbull, Brent Craft, Ben Jackson, Phil Lowlins, Mr. Festech, Robertson Dunn, Lefty Intrigued Gaming, Abby Morris, Tim Labonte, Yasobi Kwang DX, Tim Lunn, Genovi, Hernandez, Pixels.Limited, aka Samuel Victor, Red the Beard, Conrad Constantine, Pretendo64, Creamy Elephant, James Loveridge, Casey Garner, Blitz Hedgie, Savage Gaming Show, Gemma, Mr. T Shirts, Sir Right Away, Monster Finger Games, creators of Alien Scumbags, Mike H. Fell, Lucer Softail, Ye Old Hamburglar, Gregory Arden, Bewright, the conduit of still catching up on previous seasons, Ronnie Method, SSWB, Solix Captor, Jeremy Rodriguez, Nick Pollard, Bram Perez, Marcus King, Emocut Tyndall, June, The Geeky Dad, Richard Carter, aka Fantastic Dizzy, Todd Paul Float G, Petty Mew, Mark S. Hines, and Carl Watkins. If you wanted to get your name shouted out, come and see what I'm working on, come and see all of the other exclusive stuff that I like to share with these incredible patrons, and to be part of my Discord server, which I am now an official partner of. Thank you very, very much, Discordians. Then yeah, check all those links below, and please do click the link that you see on the screen. But anyway guys, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.